بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. اللهم افتح علينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا والحمد لله رب العالمين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. The fifth book is one of the most beneficial for us because it deals with the adab of the student and also of the teacher. And so there are a lot of really important points that he makes. So this is the fifth book that we're entering into, and he's got these 10 branches. So he begins, أَمَّا الْمُتَعَلَّمْ فَآدَابُهُ وَوَظَائِفُهُ الظَّاهِرَةُ كَثِيرَةٌ. Adab is a very important concept in our religion. There's a hadith that there's some weakness in the chain, but the meaning is sound, and all of the ulama have quoted it. It's very commonly quoted in books of knowledge. أَدَّبَنِي رَبِّي فَأَحْسَنَ تَأْدِيبِي. And ta'deeb, it's a difficult word to translate into English because we don't have an equivalent word. One of the things, when you look up in a dictionary, you'll see, for instance, if you look at a word that you found in a sentence that you didn't know and you look it up, it will very often say 1, 2, 3, 4, sometimes go up to 10, 15 meanings. And these are the different meanings in the context. Because words, you can have a word that is the same word, but it has several different meanings. And in the Islamic tradition, this goes under logic, and it also is taught in ilm al-wada', which is a unique science that Abdul-Din al-Iji actually invented. In fact, Bernard Weiss says it's one of the unique contributions of the Islamic civilization, that science, which is understanding what words mean in their different contexts. And this is one of the major interests of modern philosophy, which is the elusiveness of the meanings of words. And so when you look at a word like adab or adab in the plural, it's a very difficult word to pin down. It has the idea of comportment, and comportment is really how you carry yourself. Portare is to carry, with the way in which you carry yourself. And that was a common word in the 19th century in the English language. In fact, comportment was on 19th century report cards at schools. So you actually had, children were graded based on their comportment, on their adab, on how they behave. It also has the idea of discipline. And mu'addib is a teacher, but it's also the one who disciplines, yu'addibuni. So, and it also has the idea of literature in the later classical tradition. So the adab is the idea of a literary tradition, and the adib was the erudite literary master, the adib, somebody who mastered language. He knew poetry, he knew prose, he knew rhetoric very well. And so they're all related. All these meanings are related to the idea of adab. So courtesy, spiritual courtesy is one of the meanings. But it's a very important quality. And in fact, Sayyidina Naqib al-Attas, who in my estimation is really one of the most important thinkers to come out of the Muslim world in the 20th century. That's my estimation of him. Sayyidina Naqib al-Attas wrote a book about secularism and its threat to the Islamic ethos, because Muslims, secularism arose out of a unique and distinct set of historical circumstances that were specific to the European situation and really didn't relate to the Islamic ethos. And yet, secularism is now imposed on the world because of the hegemony of the secular culture. And in fact, laicism, which is the French form of secularism, and it's obviously the model that was adopted in Turkey. Laicism is worse than secularism because it has an intense animosity towards religion, whereas secularism wants to marginalize religion, but it still allows religion to play a role in society. So a politician can be religious, can be committed to religion. He can even have views from a religious perspective. Somebody can be a politician in America and be anti-abortion because of his religion, and he can actually campaign based on that, and people will vote for him if they side with him on that issue. Whereas in laicism, you can't. It just excludes religion from the public space. Stephen Carter wrote a book about disbelief, which in our tradition is called kufr, and one of the things that he argued was that secular societies want God reduced to a hobby in the garage, or garage for those from England. Just reduce God to a hobby. You can tinker around with religion, but don't bring it outside of your hobby space at home. So he says that there's a lot of adab that the learner has to have, and also wada'if. Wada'if are those things that you practice on a regular basis. That's why the wird, traditionally a long wird, was called wadifa. It's like an occupation. And in modern Arabic, wadifa means a job. So you say wadifa, wadifati mu'allim or something. And then he says the outward aspects of this are many. وَلَكِنْ تَنْظِمُ تَفَارِعَهَا عَشْرُ جُمَلٍ. But we can organize its branches into 10 statements. The first wadifa, or occupation, of the student of knowledge is تقديم طهارة النفس عن رذائل الأخلاق ومذموم الأوصاف. That they should make the purification of their souls from negative qualities, from vices and attributes. They should make this their priority. So the priority should be to purify yourself. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. And also, يوم لا ينفع مال ولا بنون إلا من أتى الله بقلب سليم. That on Yom Qiyamah, the only one of benefit is the one who comes to God with a sound heart. Salamat al-qalb means tahir al-qalb. His heart is pure. It's wholesome. Salama is wholesomeness. It's also peace. So it's a heart at peace. It's no longer struggling against its lower self. And so he says that should be the priority. Because ilm is ibadatul qalb. Knowledge is the worship of the mind. Here he means qalb in the sense of the mind. لهم قلوب لا يفقهون بها. They have hearts, but they don't understand with them. In other words, understanding is the purpose of the heart. And understanding is what leads to knowledge. And so the fruit of the heart is knowledge. And that's why nurturing the heart is inculcating the virtue of knowledge in the heart. وَصَلَاتُ السِّرِّ. And this is the prayer of the secret, the mystery of the human being. وَقُرْبَةُ الْبَاطِنِ إِلَى اللَّهِ. And it's the way in which the interior of man draws near to God. And he says, وكما لا تصح الصلاة التي هي وظيفة الجوارح الظاهرة إلا بتطهير الظاهر عن الأحداث والأخباث فكذلك لا تصح عبادة الباطن وعمارة القلب بالعلم إلا بعد طهارته عن خبائث الأخلاق وأنجاس الأوصاف. So he says that just as the outward form of the prayer is unsound if the outward limbs are not doing their appropriate actions, and also you have to be purified outwardly from the ahdath and the akhbath or khabaith. So hopefully everybody did tahara, so you know the hadath and the khabath, because you have to be tahirun min al-ahdathi wa min al-akhbathi. So he's saying, just as you have to be pure of those outward things, لا تصح عبادة الباطن وعمارة القلب بالعلم إلا بعد طهارته. So like that, your devotion, your interior devotion, which is really the purpose. The outward is just the form, it's the vessel. But the inward reality is the purpose. It is not sound if it's not pure. From khaba'ith al-akhlaq, right? From the khaba'ith of your character, the foulness of your character, wal ahdath, the hadath, those things that arise occur. Because you have khabath, which is a specific ayn, it's something that's foul, but then you have the hadath, which arises. And so you have both. So when you have bad character, you might not be angry, but when the hadath occurs, you become angry. And that's like the inward of what the outward occurrence of passing wind or urinating or defecating, something like that. So وقال صلى الله عليه وسلم بني الدين على النظافة والنظافة من الإيمان. There are many. والطهور شطر الإيمان. Purification is half of faith. So وهو كذلك باطنا وظاهرا. And this is the reality. Inwardly and outwardly, purification is the essence of this religion. Islam was built on purity. And so this is the foundation. وقال الله تعالى إنما المشركون نجس. That the mushrikun are impure. تنبيها للعقول على أن الطهارة والنجاسة غير مقصورة على الظواهر المدركة بالحس. And this is in order to let us know that the najasa is not just this najasa of outward things, these impurities. No, their reality is impure because their interior is impure through the vice of idolatry and these impurities of understanding. So understanding can be impure, garbage in, garbage out. All this media that you see, the foulness of it, and people imbibing it, taking it in, and it's having an effect on the heart. And then they wonder why their children go and stab somebody. Well, look at the video games that they're playing. These are developing minds. They're not fully developed yet. You've got a 12-year-old kid who's has a game where he gets points for shooting heads, and then he goes to school and shoots 8 kids in West Virginia or wherever it was, 8 kids, all of them headshots. And the FBI, when they went to his house, they found that that was the game, and he was obsessed with the game. So this is the reality. If you allow all this filth to come in, then it's going to come out. كُلُّ وِعَنْ بِمَا فِيهِ يَنْضَحُ. A vessel can only pour forth what it contains. So if you fill the vessel up with filth, and then it pours forth filth, why are you surprised? They say, well, that's millions of people play these games, they don't do that. طيب. Even if one person does it as a result of those games, it's an argument to get rid of those games. And the CDC just did a study, 1 out of 10 people in America die direct result of alcohol. Suppressed study. They didn't even put it in the major newspapers. 1 out of 10. You know, decimation, to decimate means to kill 1 out of 10. That's the original meaning of that term, decimate. Right? To take 1 out of 10. You decimate a people. So here's a filth, the al-khaba'ith, the mother, the matrix of foulness, is killing 1 out of 10 people, and there's no war on alcohol. There's a war on marijuana, right? Marijuana's not killing 1 out of 10 people. It's probably doing a lot to calm Americans down because they're so riled up, right? Should probably put it in the water in that country, you know, just to calm people down. It's a murqid, you know, in Sharia. It's like, it's a soporific, you know, it's one of those things that, I mean, the ulama talked about the difference between alcohol and marijuana. Qanab, they called it. Qanab, you know, like cannabis. So, you know, it's haram. They considered it haram. But they saw it as less than alcohol. And yet in America, it's prohibited, and then alcohol is permissible, yet it's killing 1 out of 10 people. It's massive. Unbelievable. And then he says, he quotes a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, لا تدخل الملائكة بيتا فيه كلب. And in a riwayah it says بيت فيه كلب وصورة, a dog or an image. And the surah is not a picture, because it meant like a statue, something that had ab'ad. It cast a shadow, and it had, because the Prophet permitted clothes that had pictures, and that's clear in the hadith. So what does he say? وَالْقَلْبُ بَيْتٌ هُوَ مَنْزِلُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ وَمَهْبِطُ أَثَرِهِمْ وَمَحَلُّ إِسْتِقْرَارِهِمْ. The heart is a house also. It is the abode of the angels. It is the place in which their effect takes place. It is the محل استقرارهم. It's the locus whereupon they are fixed. والصفات الرديئة مثل الغضب والشهوة والحقد والحسد والكبر والعجب وأخواتها كلاب نابحة. And all of these vile qualities, like anger, like shahwa, lust and appetites, low appetites, rancor, envy, arrogance, vanity, and its sisters. These were called sisters. Interesting that St. Thomas Aquinas called them daughters. Kiramun nabiha. They are barking dogs, right? Because Imam Al-Ghazali in the Kimya, Sa'ada, and other places, he talks about the three souls, the dog soul, the sage soul, and the pig soul. So he's got the sage soul, which is the Shaykh, represented by the aql, and then he's got the dog soul, kalb, which is represented by the ghadabiyya, the quwwa ghadabiyya. And then he's got the pig soul, which is the khinzir, which is represented by the shahwa. So these three, these two, if they take over, they overwhelm the sheikh and they become, they rule. So that's the nafs. If it's purified, it's called a ruh, an aql, a sir. I mean, there's a whole bunch of words for it. Fu'ad is one they use. So what he's saying is that the angels don't enter a house that has dog in it. And he's saying that one of the meanings, and he doesn't negate the outward meaning. In fact, it's very important because he says, وَلَسْتُ أَقُولُ الْمُرَادْ بِلَفْظِ الْبَيْتِ هُوَ الْقَلْبِ وَبِالْكَلْبِ هُوَ الْغَضَبِ وَالصِّفَاتِ الْمَذْمُومَةِ لَكِنِّي أَقُولُ هُوَ تَنْبِيهٌ عَلَيْهِ. I'm not saying that the hadith means this, because that's the way the Batiniyya people go, esoterics. They negate the outward meaning and they assert some esoteric interpretation. What he's saying is, this is an extension, that we can derive this meaning from it, that the heart is a house, it's an abode of knowledge. It's also the place of lammatul malak. It's the angelic inspiration occurs in the heart. If the heart is being ruled by the dog and the pig, then the angels aren't going to go in, because it's not a place of tahara, it's a place of akhbath. And so that means that the angelic inspiration won't be there. You'll either be angry or you'll be lustful. And these are the two, some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that ice is also great and for destruction would suffice. that these are the two things, the poet, what he's saying is these are the two forces in the world that are destructive. The fire and ice. And these are the sins of the dog soul, the sins of the dog faculty in the soul, and the sins of the pig faculty. So the pig faculty, the shahwa, is fire. It's passion, it's heat. The dog soul is cold, it's ice, it's hatred, it's anger. So these are the cold sins and the hot sins. The cold sins in our tradition are worse than the hot sins. The sins of pride, of anger, of envy, of hatred. These are really, and this is the source of so much suffering in the world. The hot sins are also very destructive. They burn things up. Hate tears it down with a sledgehammer, but fire burns it down. So he's warning about this, that if your heart, the angels aren't going to enter into a place that's filled with dogs. And the light of knowledge, God only thrust it into the heart by way of the angels. وَمَا كَانَ لِبَشَرٍ أَن يُكَلِّمُهُ اللَّهُ إِلَّا وَحْيًا أَوْ مِنْ وَرَاءِ حِجَابٍ أَوْ يُرْسِلَ رَسُولًا. It only comes through wahi, which is revelation, or behind a veil, the kashf that comes, or he sends an angel. And we believe in angelic inspiration. The Prophet ﷺ said when he told Hassan ibn Thabit, the great poet of Medina, he told him, ahju, criticize him with your poetry. In other words, the mushrikeen. Criticize him with your poetry, because they used to write poems against the Prophet, so Hassan would write poems in response, the war of poetry. And so the Prophet said, وَأَيَّدَكَ اللَّهُ بِرُوحِ الْقُدُسِ, and may Allah strengthen you with the Holy Spirit. In other words, inspire you with the angelic force so that your poetry comes from an inspired source. And just like you have demonically inspired people, I mean, some of these comedians and some of these, you watch them and it's clear. I mean, these guys, where are those words coming from? Where are they coming from? Seriously, where are they coming from? Because they're powerful, some of these guys, right? And you listen to them and they're doing some invocation, just the wrong kind, right? I mean, just listen to one of their rants when they start going. Where is it coming? They don't know where it's coming from. And one of the hallmarks of these people is they're very agitated. You'll watch them and they move a lot. This is a sign that you're dealing with demonic, because the Prophet said they get pinched by the demons. And so they literally start to move. You watch them, these people. They can't sit still and just talk. They have to do that because they're having trouble. Shaitan doesn't give them sakina, and it makes them very troubled. They end up like killing themselves and things. A lot of these people, they suffer, but they make deals and, it's not on the dotted line in blood. It's a long series of negotiations, right? You compromise your conscience a little bit. You give a little bit each time till before you know it, you don't have any values anymore, right? So he's saying, don't think that I'm following the way of the Batini people. He was not a polemicist. There are other ulama that pretty much their whole career was just polemics, attacking others, very common even during his time, and other scholars. He was not a polemicist, but he did write some polemics. They were all against the Batiniya. And you can obviously sense the polemics in here against the ulama as-su, because he was very bothered by the ulama that were abusing this tradition. But he doesn't name names. He doesn't attack people by name, and this is the difference. It's important to point out who the ulama su are and what their attributes are. That's what he does. But he's not saying so and so and so and so. You need to work that out yourself. And that's to guard you also, because you don't know. You have to be very careful with ta'yin, pointing. The Prophet said, "Ma baru aqwam." What's wrong with certain people that do this, that, or the other? And he let other people, you work it out for yourselves. You work it out for yourself, because he wasn't teaching people to attack individuals. First of all, because you want people's guidance. So when you say ma baru aqwam, and then somebody says, "Wow, that sounds just like me," it can help them. If they're sincere, it can actually be a source of tawbah, because some of these people, they don't really even know it. Arrogant people are very unaware of their arrogance, just like people with high blood pressure very often don't know they have the silent killer. They're walking around with high blood pressure. They don't know their heart's sick physically. There are many people that don't know their heart's sick spiritually. But if you start telling them, I had somebody came to me once and told me that, he hated me and this and that and other. He apologized and everything. But he said that he read this thing about purification of the heart, and he just said he could see himself in all the diseases, right? So, you help people by pointing that out, but you don't help it by attacking people individually. It's not helpful for them. It does the opposite effect. They become more obstinate. Because who does he think he is? Telling me this, that, or the other. So that was not his way. And then he says, he said the dog was not blameworthy because of its form. It's blameworthy because of its aggressive nature. Obviously, I'll just mention this here, because the Arabs of the desert had dogs, and the Prophet permitted that. And he also, it's permissible, according to the fuqaha, to have a dog as a guard dog in your house. If you live in places where there's a lot of crime or there's fear, then it's permissible to have a dog. But, and then dog people like shepherds and things like that. We went to a house the other day, they had sheep, and they had these amazing Turkish dogs, sheep dogs. So a dog is actually a beautiful animal. It's a creature of God. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted consuming the food of dogs that they capture. So if a dog kills, if it's a mu'allam, in fact, that's one of the arguments. They say even the dog that is given the knowledge of how to hunt is elevated in the Quran. That's how precious knowledge is. So even the dog that has knowledge gets elevated in the Quran. We also know the dog of the Ashab al-Kahf is honored in the Quran. And there's, in the tafsirs, they say it's animal of paradise. And unfortunately, there's a lot of cruelty to dogs in the Muslim world, which is unfortunate. There were dogs that were very, very vicious in Mecca, and they had kalab, they had rabies. They used to come down from the mountains, and many of the hadiths referred to those dogs specifically. But the Prophet did not like dogs in the house, but we know that Aisha had a puppy dog in the house, and that's when he was told that the dog should be kept outside. So even in the house of the Prophet, there was a puppy dog. The Prophet treated animals very well. He did not have any cruelty towards animals. He respected animals as signs of God. Even the pig, according to the Maliki madhab, is tahir. It's not considered najas. Imam Malik doesn't consider the dog or the pig najas. Different cultures have, in Turkey, they're traditionally a nomadic people, and so they were a dog people, because nomads always have dogs. My own teacher, Murabt al-Hajj, there was a dog in the encampment, and he used to feed it from his left hand at dinner time. He'd literally put couscous in his hand, and he would feed the dog. I saw it with my own eyes. And he told me when he was doing that once, he said, every living thing, there's a reward in feeding it or treating it kindly. Every living thing. So this contempt that people have for animals is really something I feel needs to be eradicated, because I think one of the signs of sociopathy is the ability to torture animals. And I know one Muslim country that I lived in, one of the things that kids would do when they'd get their driver's license for fun would to go and run over cats as a fun thing to do, which is a very, very sick society that could produce people like that. So, and torturers, you know how they train them, don't you? Right? Torturing animals. That's how the Americans train torturers in South America and Central America. To torture animals first, because if you can torture animals, why do you think at medical school, right, they work dentistry? Where do they do it? On dogs and things like that, right? Get them used to torturing dogs. That's what, right? And then you can do it. So he says, if your heart's filled with anger, if your heart's filled with desire, and if it's filled with this covetousness and this love of tearing people's honor and dignity apart, that you're a dog, kalbun fil ma'na. The reality of your heart is you have a dog heart. وَقَلْبٌ فِي الصُّورَةِ. So you're kalbun fil ma'na, وَقَلْبٌ فِي الصُّورَةِ. Right? It's a kalb in its meaning, but it's a qalb in its form. And he said that people are raised in their spiritual form, not in their physical form. So there's people that are raised, he says, as a dog, kalban dariyan, like a vicious dog, and some as a wolf. And the mutakabbir comes, this is a hadith sahih, the mutakabbir comes in the form of an ant, and people will like step on it. It's nothing. And then the seeker of riyasa in the form of a lion. This is, there's a very interesting book. It's one of my favorite books. And really it should be translated, but people should read it. It's called Siraj al-Muluk by Abu Bakr al-Tortoshi. It really changed your perspective on governments and on rulers, and it's very interesting. And he was a very righteous, pious scholar. He was a teacher of Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi. And Sidi Ahmed Zarruq mentions, because his opinion was that cheese was not permitted if it came from European countries, which is not a dominant opinion, but that was his opinion. And Sidi Ahmed Zarruq said, he said that everybody has an animal form. And he said that scholars that are very filled with pride, they're peacocks. Just like you have the peacock spread its feather, the feathers. So he said that's their reality. And God gave the peacock the ugliest feet in creation. So if they would just humble themselves and look down, they would see that they really shouldn't be bragging so much. But he said that there's a certain type of person, he said, that just loves to argue. And they will always argue. They're just going to argue. And you know these people. Maybe you're one of them. But they have to get in an argument with you. They're never going to not. Within a few minutes, it's going to be an argument. And it's a disease, But he says that their animal form is a donkey, because they're just stubborn by nature. And so he says, when you see it, just enjoy it. He said, look at it like a show. Because a lot of people, they get caught up and they want to argue back. And he said, just enjoy the show. Don't get upset. Don't, just relax. It's a nafs form, like argumentation. Imam Malik, if people started arguing, he literally got up from the majlis. He used to shake his rida and walk away, like shake them off. And he'd walk away. He didn't argue, Imam Malik. But some people, they love to argue, just want a good argument, right? Nothing like a good argument. It's a lot of marriages based on that. I've told you 1,000 times. Indeed you have. You're acting just like your mother. How dare you say that? I don't know why I ever married you. I'm wondering that too. Right? They do it with a little more energy than I'm doing it right now. But you know the script. These are scripts, right? Seriously, and they're replicated all over the place. That's what films are all based on. It's just scripts, just scripts. So you can erase those tapes if you want to. It just takes work. You can't just click the button, erase. You actually have to get the eraser out, the spiritual eraser. And it's like, how you have something written there and it's really hard to erase. It takes a while. But if you keep at it, keep doing it, that's called dhikr. Right? That's the eraser God gave us. Right? Just keep erasing it. And eventually those scripts will go and they'll be replaced with, in fact, I saw a Sudanese man mention that. He said, people complain about their wives, but he said, a nagging wife is actually a great blessing if you understand it. He said, first of all, they'll keep you in a state of dhikr. Because they go on and on, you'll be like, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Subhanallah. Astaghfirullah. La ilaha illallah. Right? That's what he said. So he said, just do the dhikr. Right? And this goes for the ladies if they have one of those men too. And then he said, you'll stay slim because you won't want to eat their food. He said you'll visit your relatives more because anything to get out of the house. So he said that there can be benefits as well. Yeah. So then he says, now if you say, well, people with bad character gain knowledge. He says, فَهَيْهَاتٍ. How far are you from the real knowledge, the beneficial knowledge of the akhirah, which brings joy and sa'ada, felicity? He said, these are deadly poisons. And he said, do you think gaining a poison with it, despite the knowledge, is still not going to kill you? And he said, إنما الذي تسمعه من المترسمين. That's what he calls them. حديث ترقفوه يريدونه بألسنتهم مرة ويرددونه بقلوبهم أخرى وليس ذلك من العلم في شيء. قال ابن مسعود, and this is also on Malik, ليس العلم بكثرة الرواية وإنما العلم نور يقذف في القلب. So he says, this is what you see from the mutarassimin, the formalists, people that are with the rusum, shallow people, they're shallow scholars. They have the outward of knowledge. This is a hadith that they've usurped. ترقفوا يريدونه بألسنتهم. They relate it with their tongues. And other times it will move about in their hearts. But he said, but it's not knowledge. He said, Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu said, knowledge is not having a lot of narrations. Knowledge is a light that's thrust into the heart. And then some of them said knowledge is awe of Allah. And those who have awe of God are the ulama. And this is an ishara, an indication at the fruits of knowledge, what true knowledge is. And then the second wazifa is that يقلل علائقه من أشغال الدنيا ويبعد عن أهل والوطن. That the second occupation that the student of knowledge should be in, that he should diminish any attachments to preoccupations of this world and distance himself from family and country. And this is the tradition of Rihla, which was what this was named after, is that traditionally people would set out, they would leave the ma'luf, what they were accustomed to, and they would enter into another place so that they could be free of the local attachments. One of the criminal aspects of the American criminal justice system, and that's what they call it, a criminal justice system. I mean, isn't that interesting? Like, why is the adjective there? That's very interesting, because the adjective is what qualifies the substantive. So the adjective is criminal for the justice system. It's very odd. It should, I mean, you would think it would be like the justice system for criminals, but it's not. It's called the criminal justice system. Put that in Orwell's pipe, right? So in that criminal justice system, one of the things that they do with these poor parolees is they have to go back to the place where they committed the crime. So that's like sending a man with malaria after you've treated him back to the malarial swamp. And these poor people, they go back and suddenly, hey man, you want to hit? You know, he's just out of prison. He's been off drugs for the last 2 years. And some guy, hey, you know, hey, Louis, where you been, man? Come here. Yeah, the first one's free. That's what they always do, right? Get them addicted. It's like those television, you know, a month free, you know, Netflix. Try it for free and before, right? And then they can't get out. So he's saying, get away from the ahl and the watan. تغرب عن الأوطان إن كنت طالبا, right? Go, distance yourself from the lands if you're seeking knowledge, because they preoccupy you. العلم لا يعطيك بعضه حتى تعطيه كلك. Knowledge will not give you some of it until you give it all of you. And if you give it all of you, it will give you some of it. But it's still dangerous. And so that's what he's saying. The third one, الوظيفة الثالثة ألا يتكبر على العلم ولا يتأمر على المعلم. That do not be arrogant with this knowledge. And this because sophomore is an interesting word. You have the freshmen, they don't know anything. They come in, but the sophomore is a Greek word which means wise fool. Because you're no longer a freshman, you have a little bit of knowledge, so you become the wise fool. And that's what a little bit of knowledge can make you arrogant. And that's a little bit of learning is a dangerous thing. So drink deep from, or taste not the Pyrean spring, right? How's it go? You know that one? Shaykh. That a little bit of learning is dangerous. So drink deeply, right? Because shallow draughts intoxicate the brain, and drinking deeply restore us once again. You know that if you take a little bit of knowledge, you get intoxicated with it, drunk with thinking that you know something. So he's saying, he's warning about that. And then, وَلَا يَتَأَمَّرَ عَلَى الْمُعَلِّمِ. Don't become imperious with your teacher. Don't be rude. Don't be arrogant. And you might know more than him about something. The Arabs say, يُوجَدُ فِي النَّهْرِ مَا لَا يُوجَدُ فِي الْبَحْرِ. You'll find in rivers what you don't find in oceans sometimes. So you might know something, or they might make a mistake and you recognize the mistake. So he's warning about that. And he says, بَلْ يُلْقِي إِلَيْهِ زِمَامَ أَمْرِهِ بِالْكُلِّيَّةِ فِي كُلِّ تَفْصِيلٍ وَيُذْعِنُ لِنُصْحِهِ إِذْعَانَ الْمَرِيضِ الْجَاهِلِ لِلطَّبِيبِ الْمُشْفِقِ الْحَاذِقِ. So he should يُذْعِنُ لِنُصْحِهِ. إِذْعَان is docility. He should be docile. Now, isn't it interesting that docile comes from docere, to learn. So a docile person literally means teachable in English. In other words, when you're malleable, when you're humble, then you can learn. But if you're arrogant, if you're full of yourself, if you come with that attitude, then you're not going to learn. So he said it's necessary to be humble before your teacher and to يطلب الثواب والشرف بخدمته. Sha'bi said, Zayd ibn Thabit prayed a funeral prayer. فَقُرِّبَتْ إِلَيْهِ بَغْلَتُهُ لِيَرْكَبَهَا. And so his mule was brought to him so he could ride it, and Ibn Abbas took the reins. And Zayd said, خَلِّ عَنْهُ يَا ابْنَ عَمِّ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. Don't do that. Zayd ibn Thabit was a great scholar. And Ibn Abbas took that, and he said, oh, cousin of the Messenger of God, leave that alone. And Ibn Abbas said, هَكَذَا أُمِرْنَا أَن نَفْعَلَ بِالْعُلَمَاءِ وَالْكُبَرَاءِ. No, this is what we were commanded to do with scholars and with the great amongst us. فَقَبَّلَ زَيْدْ بْنُ ثَابِتْ يَدَهُ. And so Zayd kissed his hand and said, هَكَذَا أُمِرْنَا نَفَعْلَ بِأَهْلِ بَيْتِ نَبِيِّنَا صلى الله عليه وسلم. This is what we were commanded to do with the family of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. Look at the adab between these two people. فقال صلى الله عليه وسلم ليس من أخلاق المؤمن التملق إلا في طلب العلم. It is not from the character of the believer to have adulation. Tamalluq is usually flattery, mutamallaq, somebody who obsequious or flatters people. But it could also, it has the idea of just, to hold somebody in high esteem, but it's really a negative term in Arabic. So what the Prophet ﷺ is saying, this is negative except in relation to the student and teacher relationship. It's not negative in that case. فَلَا يَنْبَغِي لِلطَّالِبِ أَنْ يَتَكَبَّرَ عَلَى الْمُعَلَّمِ. A student should never be arrogant with his teacher. وَمِنْ تَكَبُّرِهِ عَلَى الْمُعَلَّمِ أَنْ يَسْتَنْكِفَ مِنَ الْإِسْتِفَادَةِ إِلَّا مِنَ الْمَرْمُوقِينَ الْمَشْهُورِينَ. And from the arrogance of a student is that they refuse to learn except from notables. They don't want to sit with the humble. They don't want to sit with a teacher maybe that is not well known. That's a sign of arrogance. If somebody has a knowledge, you should benefit from that knowledge, even if you think that they're not a notable person. And the same goes for the scholars. Somebody might know something that they don't know. They shouldn't be ashamed to go to them. And he said, وَهَذَا عَيْنُ الْحَمَاقَةِ. This is the essence of stupidity. فَإِنَّ الْعِلْمَ سَبَبُ النَّجَاةِ وَالسَّعَادَةِ. Because knowledge is the reason for his salvation and felicity. And whoever flees from that, and he says, so look at the one who's fleeing from a dangerous lion who's about to eat him. Does he differentiate between somebody famous or somebody not so well known to save him? No, don't save me. Nobody knows who you are. Right? No, he's saying, look at it that way. And he said that the danger of ignorance is worse than the danger of a dangerous lion. Because the dangerous lion can only destroy your body, but the danger of ignorance can destroy your soul. So he says, الحكمة ضالة المؤمن يغتنمها حيث يظفر بها ويتقلد المنة لمن ساق إليه كائنا من كان. So the hikmah, this wisdom, this knowledge, this is the lost beast of the believer. He'll take it from whoever finds it. And he said, whoever brings it to him. العلم حرب للفتى المتعالي كالسيل حرب للمكان العالي. And he quotes the poet who says, knowledge is a war for the young man who's haughty, just as the flood is a war for a high place. Right? So knowledge is like an ocean, and if you're not humble, it's like a flood that'll just wipe you out. فَلَا يُنَالُ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا بِالتَّوَاضُعِ وَإِلْقَاءِ السَّمْعِ. You'll not gain any knowledge except by humility and giving your listening. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَذِكْرًا. This is a reminder لِمَنْ كَانَ لَهُ قَلْبٌ أَوْ أَلْقَى السَّمْعَ وَهُوَ شَهِيدٌ. Who has a heart and gives ear to it, listens to it, and he's witnessing. He's in a state of mushahada. He's witnessing. مَعْنَ كَوْنِهِ ذَا قَلْبٌ. That he has a heart and that it's open to knowledge. It has understanding. And so he said the shaheed is hadar al-qalb. It's the one who's present and they're listening in a good way. And then he said فَلْيَكُنَ الْمُتَعَلِّمُ لِمُعَلِّمِهِ كَأَرْضٍ دَمْثَ or demitha. He should be like, with his teacher, he should be like a soft earth that a rain has come and the soil is nascent. It's soft. So something could be planted in it. Not like hard earth. You can't plant the seed. It should be soft. Allama means to be able to imprint. So you have to be like wax. And that's why it's so important to get a good teacher. And it's very important. And he's going to give you the signs of who the good teachers are, which is important.